conducted in my lab as part of the Science of Generosity initiative. And these studies are concerned with the development of what in psychology is usually called prosocial behavior. And the reason we study these behaviors is that it's such a striking feature of humans, and especially when we look at humans in comparison to other animals, that we show these prosocial behaviors like caring about others, rescuing them, helping with concrete kind of problems very voluntarily, that we donate money, that we even donate our own blood, and that we have very strong opinions about how we should share resources, that there are strong fairness norms that we follow and also impose on others. And so one major question for several fields, and developmental psychology in particular, is what are the origins of these kinds of human behaviors? Where do they come from? And one solution to the problem is that people claim that socialization practices are the main, maybe the only factor that accounts for the emergence of prosocial behaviors in humans, and especially in comparison to other animals who do not have these socialization practices. What I talk about here in particular is that there are certain norms, what I said about how we should share resources, how we should intervene on behalf of others. And so the idea is that there are these social and cultural norms that children are exposed to, and there's the expectation that they internalize these kinds of norms and gradually grow towards being prosocial beings. The underlying assumption of several of these models is that as humans we start out being purely selfish. We care only about ourselves and do not care or cannot comprehend the other people's needs as well. And so it is the sole task of the adults of the cultural environment to in some sense, train children up to become prosocial in addition to being selfish. And there's good reason to believe that, because we know that cultural norms about prosociality or cognitive behaviors more generally have a major impact on how we interact with others. And there's a lot of evidence for this. However, the problem is that the evidence looking at the role of social norms comes mainly from research with fairly old children and adults. And so if you show that these factors play a role with these individuals, you do not yet really know a lot about the origins of this, because these people have already gone through a long socialization practice. And so what is important is to study young children, because we can see if maybe an alternative hypothesis might be true that is not exactly the opposite, it can be integrated, but maybe there are prosocial inclinations that we are equipped with, and that show up very early in life already, and socialization practices can build upon it rather than be the only source of our prosocial inclinations. And so this is the overall theme of my research. So looking at the early forms of prosociality that we find maybe already in infancy and in toddlerhood, and then look at the further development of these kinds of behaviors and see how these initial forms of prosociality change through different kinds of socialization practices as social norms enter, and maybe enter in different kinds of ways in different cultural groups, and also look at the cognitive development more generally to see how different, especially social cognitive skills, mediate the social behavior of children. And I want to present three of the studies that we've conducted as part of the Science of Generosity Initiative project at Harvard. And one behavior that I want to focus on first is what I call instrumental helping. So this is one type of prosocial behavior, and it's defined as a situation where a person is trying to achieve an individual goal. Say an object is out of reach and you try to grab it, or you try to open a box or things like that, where a person is trying but failing to achieve that individual goal. And now the question is, what do you have to have? What are the psychological capacities that you have to have in order to be a competent helper? And one prerequisite for this is, and I believe, that you first of all have to have the social cognitive abilities to understand the situation in the first place. You have to be able to understand that the person has a goal in mind that he or she is not able to achieve by herself. And then, in addition, you also have to have a motivation to act upon that. So you have to have the inclination to act on behalf of the other. And in some situations, when this is aimed at benefiting the other person rather than is aimed at an immediate benefit to yourself, we can maybe talk about a prosocial motivation that underlies this. Okay, so this is the basic phenomenon, and I want to give you 2 examples of this. So what you will see here is, and some people of you have already seen that in New Orleans, a person is hanging towels on a clothesline displayed in a small screen over there, and then drops a clothespin on the floor, and an 18-month-old toddler is observing this. And so what I should add here is that we saw this behavior emerging spontaneously, so the children were never told to help, there was no reward given, they were not praised, so they really did that spontaneously. And so again, going back to the conceptual idea behind this, the child had to understand that this was an event that happened by accident, so this was not my goal that the clothespin lands on the floor, and have the motivation to help. And to give another example, what we were interested in was exactly this social cognitive ability to meet different kinds of goals and intervene. And so in a different kind of task, the goal was not to get an object, but put an object away. So in this task, I first put a stack of magazines into a cabinet, then closed the doors, went to the other end of the room to get more magazines, and then this is what manipulating whether there's a reward offered or not. It does not matter whether the parent is watching or not. It does not matter. It's been demonstrated also cross-culturally. I want to point this out by Tara Callaghan in 3 different cultural communities where she shows that this behavior emerges at the same time across different cultures and so forth. So this is the phenomenon has been replicated many times, but there's one problem that you might have recognized, and this is that we are not 100% sure from this alone how spontaneous the behavior is. Because even though the person is not actively soliciting the help from the child by asking for help and so forth in most of these situations, especially something like a reaching act could be regarded as a communicative act. Like this might be similar to give me that, right? And when there are gaze alternations going on, this might then also be regarded as some indirect way of telling the child, help, hey, help me here. And so what we were interested in finding out is to what extent children can read the need for help from more subtle cues. And that would help us to probe their cognitive understanding of other people's goals that might not necessarily depend on something that might be regarded as a communicative act. In addition, we were interested in finding out to what extent this is truly spontaneous behavior and not solicited by the other. And so what I investigated in a new study was then what I call proactive helping. So you could consider these situations as something where it's reactive helping because you're responding to a communicative act or you're responding to the expression of the problem. And so what I was wondering was to what extent children would engage in proactive helping where there is no concurrent behavioral cue from the recipient. There's no communication going on, and therefore there's no implicit or explicit request to help. And so what we did in my lab was we created a situation that was fairly similar to what you saw at the very beginning with the clothespin task. In that an object would fall on the ground, but the difference here was that it happened without the experimenter even noticing that there was a problem. So what we had was, this is the bird's eye view of the testing room, an experimenter over here sorting milk cans on these two tables, while the child was having fun over here with a toy playing and doing her own thing. But then while the experimenter was involved in her task over there, suddenly a can rolled off the floor without the experimenter noticing because she was directed in this way, okay? And so we were interested in finding out to what extent children can understand from the situation alone, without the experimenter doing anything, that this was a problem and that needs intervention. And so what we did in this design was we tested tuggers again, and we had 2 blocks with an exposure trial prior to the problem, where the person was indicating whether she wanted to put the cans away or whether some cans going on the floor is not a problem. In a between subject design, where the experimental condition, the object in this exposure dropped accidentally, and a control condition, she discarded the objects on purpose, and then followed by 3 test trials to see to what extent the children help instrumentally by picking up the can, but also seeing to what extent they might alert the person with some communicative acts. And so this is what we found. So this plots the mean percentage of trials in which the children would show some kind of prosocial behavior. So this is the height of the bars, either informing or helping. And the black bars are where they just help instrumentally without communicating, and the gray bars are where they used a combination of both. So maybe they would start out saying, hey, your can fell, and because the experiment never responded, they would then go up and pick it up and give it to her. And so what was striking is that when we look at the question of proactive helping, that it emerges around 24 months of age. So the 20-month-olds didn't really do it consistently, that they can do that without any prompting from the experimenter, and indicating to us that their social cognitive ability to read intentions makes it possible for them to engage in this sophisticated behavior, merging nicely over the second and third year of life. Okay, so this is one example for helping behaviors. As I said, this is just one type of prosocial behavior, and we wanted to look also at other ones. And what we studied in 2 other studies is sharing. And so let's maybe mention real brief a paradigm that you guys already know, which is the dictator game, used in behavioral economics extensively, where people split a resource between oneself and another individual. Usually this is done anonymous in a one-shot situation, so that there's no possibility for reciprocation and retaliation. And the overall finding was that adults share on average 30% of the endowment. However, recent studies, in particular by Joe Henrik and his group, have shown that there is quite some cultural variation in this behavior. So you see on one